Hi, I'm Martha Scheeler, and I'm going to interview Laura Hobbs, who is running for Shasta Supervisor District 2, Shasta County, California. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Martha.
How are you?
Well, we had our election commission meeting on Monday at 2 p.m. and then we had the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday.
Okay, I can't wait to talk about that. So I wanted to ask you about Christmas, what you think about this time of year.
Well, Jesus is the reason for the season, so that's the first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so celebrating his birthday and his gift to mankind, which was his sacrifice and our salvation.
Yeah.
And then just keeping it, simple. I like to give the kids presents. It's a joy and an honor, but we don't overdo it. And I just enjoy in the season of, people are a little more lighthearted and a little more generous in giving, and so it's a fun season.
It's a special time. I was thinking about how that was a huge choice to become uncomfortable for a little bit. He was more than uncomfortable at the end of his life, but it is inspiring to think of the discomfort because, in a sense, we can play a small part. You're being uncomfortable in choosing to run for supervisor because you're doing it sacrificially, but you see a problem that needs to be solved, and there needed to be somebody to solve it, and there wasn't anybody else standing up to do it, so it was like, okay, guess I'll do this, right?
Yeah, it just pales in comparison to his sacrifice, but I'm honored that you would even think of that in the same breath, because the ultimate sacrifice was what he did for us, and for me to be here and just be able to run my race. I mean, not the race for supervisor, but live my life, to have everlasting life with him. That's
pretty awesome.
That's my my ultimate goal.
So we talked about an event that you had last weekend. You had an event with somebody famous.
Yep, Dr. Frank came to town. He gave a talk on Saturday, December 16th at the Red Lion. But he also held 2 very long, in-depth meetings with the citizens groups that want to get organized and make real change in their community.
Okay, well, that's cool. So he was also on the radio a little bit?
He was on Sovereign Minds on Sunday, December 17th. He was also on Terry Raposa's show on December 10th. So those are archived on KCNR1460.com. So he talked about how our voter rolls continue to grow and it outpaces the population growth of eligible voters. And he does a lot of analysis just on the voter rolls themselves. But one of the striking things was from the 2020 election is that the number of votes that our ROV reported was actually less than what the Secretary of State reported. So the Secretary of State somehow came up with 3,700 more votes than what our ROV reported. So there's some...
Which election was that?
2020. So far nobody has come up with a valid reason for why that is, and he finds this all across the United States. What he's seeing is that the voter rolls are controlled at a state.
Okay. There are groups that are saying we need to clean those voter rolls up. How easy is it to clean voter rolls in California?
It's pretty easy to clean. You can use the NCOA database, which is the Register of Moved Voters.
Okay.
But the thing is, they always appear back on the voter roll not long after they've been removed.
They just show up again.
So they take out the dirty ones and then they repopulate it with more inaccurate voter registrations.
So who do you think is doing that?
What Dr. Frank says is it seems to be occurring at the statewide level, but it's not just in California, it's in every state of the union. So it has to be an organized.
I think in 2020, somebody was doing some analysis that I was talking to, and they had, like, in Shasta County, they had somebody that voted that was 127 years old or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
There are people that were born, and there were a bunch of people in other counties that were registered to vote on January 1st. Like hundreds of them, 200 and something, that all of them registered on January 1st of 2020, which most people aren't registering to vote on New Year's Day. there were people that their birth date was at the turn of the century or before 1900.
Yeah, there's so many problems, and we really, really need to get a hold of that issue. And we need to move from electronic poll books to paper poll books. And we need to just, I think, honestly, at this point, the best thing to do would be to dump all of those voter registrations and start fresh.
Good call. Yeah. So start with a new voter roll. I did hear that the poll pads is what you're talking about. So that's where when you check in, they use a poll pad to check you in.
Yes, that's right.
Another person that's in another county had said, of course they're connected to the internet. And then there was a person that they were talking to said that the poll pad, they could literally order pizza off of it while the election's being run because it's connected to the internet.
Oh, yeah, they are connected to the internet.
In 2020, the Secretary of State of California lists all the voting machines used. There's an actual spreadsheet that shows every county and what systems they're using, and the poll pads are on there. Surprisingly, 2022, they don't list the poll pads. So they were part of the election system, and now they're saying, well, they can be on the internet because they're not part of the voting system, which is absolutely untrue. Am I right?
That's true. In the case of Shasta County, we had paper poll book during the 2020, but now we have the e-poll books.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many areas in which they try to hide. The one that really stands out with me right now is the chain of custody, and we talked about this a little before, but it is just so egregious. I finally got some public records requests back, and they said they're not going to, they don't keep chain of custody when ballots are in a locked room in a secure building. So they actually told me that. I would think even though it's in a locked building, in a locked room.
There are actual literal laws about that. That is against the law. To break a seal on a box of ballots and not have a chain of custody is against the law.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter if it's in one room or in a warehouse or in, it does not matter. When you break that seal, there are protocols for that. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
So when you're observing elections, where were your observers? Were they observing those ballots in that room?
I have to admit that I wasn't an election observer in 2020.
Okay.
I didn't really get involved in this till after the 2020 election was stolen.
Me either. Right.
So, but as I understand from other people is that yes, you were allowed in the room. You had pretty much direct access to whatever you wanted. And so right now they're limiting that. So you're not allowed to go in the room where the ballots are held. And you have to oftentimes watch either through a window or through a video monitor.
Are you able to watch the machines? How they're interacting with machines? Are they all observable?
Well, you can't observe what's inside the machine, but you can watch through the window at them on the computer, running reports and whatnot. So, but you can't see what the report says or what they're clicking on,
Sure.
In this election, they did have a Hart representative the whole time that they were running ballots through the scanner and tabulating ballots. Okay. So it is interesting to see these individuals playing important roles in our election, but yet having zero public accountability.
Right. So the people can't see what's going on in the machines, and we're supposed to trust that the personnel from the election system company. The reason I ask this is because over time, while my Team Hope, was asking for records, we were finding that we were having to tell the registrar of voters how to print a report from the machine. Yeah. And we're finding out that they have no idea how to run the machine. So they have manuals, and they weren't even curious about it. We would give them a picture of the page of the manual explaining to them how to run a cast vote record report. And we were like, how is this? And one of my co-lead, Don, he said they have to have somebody there from the machine company because these people don't know anything about these machines. How can that be transparent, right?
Yeah, I know. It's the blind leading the blind, They have absolutely no idea about the inner workings of the machine, but yet they're claiming that it's fair and transparent when they themselves don't even have the expertise or the knowledge to make that statement.
Right, and the updates to these machines are done by personnel from the machine company. I listened to Colonel John Mills, and he said no defense contractor would be allowed to have that kind of restrictions. Any defense contractor that has created software to run missile defense or any other thing they would not be allowed to say, hey, we're the only ones that can run it. They would have to release the code that runs the machine. And he found it highly odd that our election, such a crucial part of our American experience, being represented by people who represent us, not people that are chosen by a few, that we would trust them and say, well, it's proprietary software. Well, they don't have proprietary software in missile defense systems or communication systems.
That's right. So they keep the code. They say it's proprietary, but it should not be. If we're buying this product, we should own it, and know the software and code. And there are some people proposing an open source software for voting machines, but even that would be better than what we have now. But I still think we need to go to hand counting.
You would still need to rely on somebody with a computer science background to interpret that code. The person who is the most likely to have their liberties trampled on should be able to see it for themselves, because they're the first ones who are going to lose their freedoms.
Yeah, we're being disenfranchised, and the ROV herself does not understand these systems.
Right.
So she shouldn't be administering an election with the system she herself doesn't understand.
Right.
It puts the citizens in jeopardy. It disenfranchises us. Every time that a fraudulent vote is cast, it takes away from a fair and valid vote.
Exactly. The California Constitution says that vote shall be counted.
And one thing that Dr. Frank said while he was here was that it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the cash register if those bills are counterfeit. So that's an issue too, is that there's so many areas to election integrity. It's not just the machines, it's the ballots themselves, it's the chain of custody, it's very complex, but also at the same time it could be very simple. We went back to hand counting and made it accessible to everybody, every citizen, and see with their own eyes that what's being conducted is fair and transparent. I wanted to direct people to Stacey Pierce's data. Stacey Pierce is in Tehama County, and she analyzed the Senate short-term and Senate long-term races, because I think it was June of 2022, we had both side by side on the same ballot. And she used the Secretary of State's data. That's where she got her data. And she first looked at Tehama County, and sure enough, everybody lost votes between the short-term assignment and the long-term assignment, except for Alex Padilla. He actually stayed pretty much constant, and everyone else lost votes. So then she looked at the rest of California, all the other counties, and sure enough, all the other counties, these candidates, the same exact candidates, lost votes from the short-term to the long-term assignment, indicating, very obvious and blatant election fraud. And you can find her report on www.shastaelectionnews.org. Just scroll down until you get to Stacey's section of the website.
So Dr. Frank,
basically, he showed that you can use one county in California to predict all the other counties in California. He said that in 2014, we had 10% too many people on the voter rolls, which was about 13,000 too many people versus the change in population. Yeah. Since 2014, there's been a 25% increase, which is 26,000 more voters on the voter roll than they should be. And San Joaquin is actually doing a lot of work on that. There's a fellow named Mr. Dave Robb. He analyzes what he calls vote churn, and he's looking at the voter rolls, and he's analyzing how they dip down and then they jump back up. They dip down, jump back up, and there's this oscillating pattern, and it's happening everywhere in all of California at pretty much the exact same sequence. It's very coordinated changes in the voter rolls. It's not just San Joaquin County. It's all of the counties doing like this synchronized dance all at the same time,
using those dirty voter rolls.
That's their credit line, fraudulent voters, and that's how our ballot votes get canceled out.
So that you can have all these ballots that could be associated with a voter that didn't vote. They get counted. That was the thing that happened in 2020, is they showed up on election day, and when they got there, they were offered a provisional ballot, and they said, no, I want to vote this ballot, and they had their mail-in ballot. But what happened is they were told they had already voted by mail, yet they're holding that ballot in their hand, in the envelope, and the election worker won't receive their ballot.
Yep. And a lot of times they count the first ballot that comes in first. So that person, even though they casted a provisional, it likely did not get counted.
Right.
And so the individuals who experience that at the polls, I recommend that you write a sworn declaration of your experience, what happened. Give it to me, give it to the Board of Supervisors, give it to the sheriff. So if you're in the polls and that's happening to you, I would call the sheriff and say, hey, I'd like to report identity theft. My identity was stolen and my vote was stolen.
When a ballot is removed from the envelope, it's anonymous. Once it's taken out of the envelope, whatever is on it does not refer to the voter. So they can't go back and go find that ballot that voted for you. That ballot is in a stack of ballots, and that vote has been cast.
These NGOs have access to the voter rolls, and they know who has voted and who has not voted down to the minute from the poll pads. So, and the NGOs can request and pay for that information from the ROV office and from the Secretary of State.
Voter rolls. They can receive those electronic records that have your name, your address, your birth date, what party you vote for.
Exactly.
That's
and
all
your
available.
Your voting history, not who you voted for, but did you vote on such and such election? And so that's all something that these NGOs and politicians can purchase, and it's useful if you're running for office.
Like the Center for Tech and Civic Life, the Zuckerbucks. Excuse me. So that on the day of the election, they can look on their computer and see if Martha Scheeler has voted yet.
Yeah. They can, and they can know exactly how many fraudulent votes they need to insert into the system in order to flip the election the way they want it to go. That's why I highly recommend that you do not vote early, that you vote on election day.
But they couldn't cheat if the machines weren't part of the process, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They couldn't cheat if we counted ballots by hand, if we voted not using a vote marker, but we actually voted using a piece of paper and a pen, or they couldn't do any of this stuff, right? It wouldn't matter how dirty the voter rolls are. If you come in and you present an ID and you say, I want to vote, and the shenanigans all rely heavily on the use of machines to tabulate. Tabulation is where the cheat happens, right?
That's how they have the computing power to know how much to cheat. A lot of states use this system called ERIC. It's used in a number of different states. So right now, California is not using it, but I believe they are eventually going to want to use it because it's part of how they calculate how many votes they need to cheat. But they also, when they get a hold of that information, they can also sell your data to third parties.
So when you download an app on your phone, you can tell it, don't sell my data.
Yeah.
But when you vote, you can't?
They found out that Konek was using basically software that was in China that represented a breach of all these people's personal data, election workers, volunteers, and just regular citizens.
Right, and they were recruiting high school students to come and work the polls.
Wow.
Actively recruiting from the Secretary of State's office. That we actually received some communications from them explaining this whole thing where they get this high school students to work at the polls. And they did the payroll through this. And all of their personal identifying information was transmitted to China, to a server in China.
Wow.
Catherine Engelbrecht and Greg Phillips discovered this.
Yes, I believe in LA, the DA of Los Angeles pressed charges, but not soon after the charges were dropped.
So we hear about, people getting your information and putting it together, and our Secretary of State is facilitating this somehow. And our county clerks are cooperating with the theft of personal information, because it can be transmitted and purchased by people we didn't agree to share it with. Is that right?
Well, each person who purchases a voter roll, they have to sign a confidentiality agreement.
We never have a problem with people that sign confidentiality agreements and then share stuff they weren't supposed to share. So there was a hit piece on Dr. Franks. It sure looks well placed. Let's just say that.
Yeah. It was published before he arrived, which is interesting because instead of after.
There you go.
So they definitely were trying to discourage participation.
Did you find that there was a good turnout?
Yeah, there was a good turnout. There was at least 200 people.
Yeah. So you went to this meeting of the.
Yes, the election commission. I presented my draft resolution for hand counting in Shasta County, separating local ballots, 1 day election, clean voter rolls, voter ID, the whole thing, and full transparency, full chain of custody. I gave them, 10 copies.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like the meeting was underattended. They're not really advertising it that well. People don't know that it's happening.
Okay.
I sense that there's a little bit of a lack of direction.
I wanted to ask you, do you have any events coming up?
My next event will be on January 4th. It's called A Conversation. It's going to be hosted by the Shasta County Republican Assembly, and it's going to be at the Shasta Bible College. They're calling it A Conversation. It's basically going to be a debate between me and my other Republican opponent, Dan Sloan.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And I encourage everyone to attend. I have another town hall on January 17th. You can find that on my website, which is www.votelaurahobbs.com, LauraHobbs.
There you go. Votelaurahobbs.com. So, what do you bring that you feel it makes you a better candidate for Shasta County?
One thing that I bring, which is unique, is that I'm not really interested in a career in politics, and this isn't a stepping stone for me for future public office. I'm willing to serve, and I want to serve the citizens of this county, and that's going to be the end goal in itself right there. Right. This is just me doing what I think is my citizen duty and obligation.
You spoke out while you were being heckled to say the truth when the truth needed to be said. And I feel like what you brought that was extremely important was you were able to take that analysis of those trends with the cast vote records. You could speak intelligently about them. But you also, it seems to me that you have a pretty well-rounded understanding of how this county operates. But I think the thing that you bring that is unique to you and not your opponent is that you're not going to just take those answers. You're going to examine those answers. You have a curiosity to make sure that you're getting the information accurately. And I think that being willing to be uncomfortable and ask questions is your greatest strength. And I don't see you looking out to try to please the Shasta GOP to make sure that you're following the party line so that you're doing the thing. Kind of looks like your opponent might do more of that.
Yeah, I'm not part of the political elite, and I'm not beholden to anyone.
So how can people help you? Are you taking donations for your campaign?
Yes, I am currently taking donations. You can go to my website and send me an email if you want to send it by mail. Probably by next week. I'll have a QR code where you can donate online. If you are interested in having a yard sign, please contact me. I'll bring one over. I'll put it out there myself. And I also have some larger 4x4 signs. If you have a property that's facing a major artery or busy street, then I'd be happy to leave a sign with you or even install it.
I think Laura shouldn't be pounding signs in the ground. I think she should be focusing on a few other things, but it's nice that you would. But I think we need a couple big, strong guys with a pickup truck that are willing to put some signs in the ground for you. What do you think?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Merry Christmas.
Happy
Christmas,
New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Enjoy your family and your friends, and be ready to hit the ground running next year.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Laura. God
Thank
bless
you, Martha. God bless you.